Business process mapping seems to have this reputation for being complicated or time consuming, especially if you are a solo service provider or part of a small team. My goal with this video is to break down exactly what business process mapping is, how you can create your first business process map, and then we'll talk about some of the real benefits for having this in place, even if you are just working for yourself. Let's start with what a business process map is. Now, when I say business process map, this is just a visual walkthrough of all the steps, decisions, and participants involved in a specific workflow from start to finish. We use different shapes to symbolize different types of steps in this workflow, and that allows us to quickly see and understand at a glance how things get done. You can see these on my screen just now. An oval or circle marks the start or end point of a workflow. We have a rectangle as an action step. Diamonds symbolize decisions, a question that is going to lead to more than one outcome or next step. And we have arrows to show the direction of travel. And the example I'm going to be sharing with you today is lead conversion, because it tends to be applicable to most of us. So everything from a new inquiry coming through all the way through to deal completion, whether that is sale won or lead lost. Once you understand how this works, you can apply it to any area of your business, whether it is recruitment, content creation, client onboarding, delivery, offboarding. You can even apply it to areas in your personal life, such as your morning routine or the kids' school run. Now, before I get into the benefits of this, I want to show you how it's done, or at least my approach to mapping a process, because I think that when you watch this take shape, you can see and experience the benefits in real time. Now, I'm going to start by writing out this sales process as a quick checklist, just so I can remember the key steps that I need to account for. So here you can see that when a new lead comes through, I follow up with a link to book a sales call. They then book the sales call. We have the sales call. From there, I create and send off a proposal. Once that proposal is accepted, I then send off a contract and my initial invoice. So I charge 50% upfront, 50% at the end. That 50% is a deposit, and that's what closes the sale. So once that invoice is paid, that lead then becomes a client. That process or workflow is complete, and I'll move on to the next one, which is onboarding. Now, this checklist is a good start. It gives us a good overview, but it also assumes that a lead says yes at every single stage and everything goes perfectly well each time, which you and I both know does not happen. And so if I was to be realistic about this full process, I'd have to account for all the decisions, the dependencies, and who is responsible at each step and at each stage. Now, if I was to account for all of that in this written format that's much more like a standard operating procedure, here's what that would look like.
Let me walk you through our Donnelly nut spacing and crack system rim riding grip configuration.
Now, I don't know about you, but I find this very confusing and not clear. I don't understand how it all works. I'm having to do a lot of mental work to try and map it out in my brain. And that's the whole point. We tend to visualize processes, and this written format gives us a lot more work to do. They say a picture tells 1,000 words. We process images 60,000 times faster than text. I don't know if that's true. I read that that might not be true, but we all say it, and there's some truth to it. And so, being able to visually see a process makes it a lot easier for us to understand what is going on. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build our process map. Now, there are a lot of tools out there you can use to do this. I will share that my very favorite one is a tool called Puzzle. Not sponsored. I just think it's the best tool out there to do this, but it's also not necessary. You can do this on pen and paper and it works just fine. I'm going to use Canva because you don't want to see my messy drawings. It is also free, and that makes it accessible to all. The first thing I'm going to do is come into Canva and look for this whiteboard option. Now we have our blank canvas. We can come to elements and we can select the shapes that we'll be working with. So if I just click on this diamond here for our decision making point, you'll notice that with Canva, all of the basic shapes allow you to type text in the middle. So I could call this decision here, and I can also come up to the color and I could change this to a color of my preference. Can also adjust the height here. So what we want to do is just add a basic guide to start us off. Now you'll see here I've went ahead and just added that in to save us some time. I will link to this business process map in the description so that you can take a look, play around with it, or just even copy and paste these elements if you want. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just screenshot that basic checklist that we did at the start, and I'm going to upload that in here for reference. That's just going to save me some time having to think through every single step again. I've got a base framework here. So we want to start with our trigger. So I'm just going to click on our shape, duplicate this, drag it over, and I'm going to call this a new lead inquiry. Next, I have an action step I need to take where I need to add this lead to my Notion CRM. So I'll copy my action step here, drag it over. I'm just going to type in add lead to Notion CRM. Now I'm adding the tool in the box here. You can always upload an icon and add it in here as well if you'd rather have the visual logo or something else to prompt you, but I find it fine just having the text written in there. Now the way that we connect these is if you click on the shape, you'll find this arrow and you just drag it along and connect it here. So now we have connected our trigger to our first action, and then after we take this action, I have a decision making point. Is this lead a good lead where I want to have a sales call with them, or it's not a good fit and I maybe just want to follow up with an email and maybe some resources? So I'll add my decision making point here, and I like to think of decisions as questions anytime we have a question that we'd ask. So let's call this good fit question mark, and we have two different paths here based on whether that lead is a good fit. So there's two different actions we might take. Our first action is if they are a good fit, we want to send a follow-up email in Gmail with call link. I can always stretch this out and make it wider. Now the other action I might take, and I'm just going to duplicate this one here, is to send them a follow-up email, but they're not a good fit. So this time I'm going to share some resources. Okay, and I might just spread that out a little bit. And again, I'm just going to connect it. So we have good fit, and then from here, I'm going to connect it to our yes, and then I'm also going to connect it to our no option. Now to distinguish between these two, I can just double click on the line that's going to add some text, and here I'm just going to put yes. I'll make it a little bit bigger and bold, be 18, and then that would be no. Perfect. Now once I've followed up with this no lead, that's not the end of the process, because I still need to go back into my Notion CRM and mark that lead as lost or no deal. So then I will add another action. I'm just copying and pasting here. Mark as no deal in Notion CRM. I will connect that. And then once I've marked that lead as no deal, that's the end of the process here. So I can click in and I can add this end of process, and I'll just mark this as deal complete. And I might even want to put in brackets no deal. Connect that. And that is the end of that process. But if they are a good fit, we'll want to send a follow-up email in Gmail, and then there's another decision making point. This time it will be the lead to decide whether they want to book the sales call or not. So again, we'll add another decision. I'm just going to drag that over a bit so we have some space to work with. This time it will be whether they book a call. And if they book a call, we'll have that sales call on Google Meet. If they don't book a sales call, we can always go ahead and say, let's follow up Gmail, and I'm going to put in brackets 4 days. And we'll want to connect those, marking this as yes, and then marking this one as no. And then if we are following up and there's no response, or they choose to not book a call, Again, we're going to come back to this, marking it as a no deal in our Notion CRM. So now we're connecting it all the way back over here. Again, we can add this as a label as no or no response. We can give it a time period. If you ever find that these lines are on top of each other, you can always move them just by dragging and dropping. Same with the tag, you can just drag and drop this text anywhere. And so now what's going to happen is if we follow up and there's no response, we'll mark them as no deal, and again that deal is going to be complete. So already you can see just how different this is, mapping the process out versus having this basic checklist on the side. We don't have the context. It's not easy for us to grasp the information. In this sense, we know exactly what to do and when. Now, before I go ahead and build out the rest of this process map, there is one thing I haven't included in here, and that is who is responsible. Now, how you manage this is going to depend on the tool you're using and the number of people involved in the process. Now, in this instance, it's either me or the lead. So there's only 2 people involved. So I could always color code these decisions based on who is making them. The other thing I can do is add some sort of color dot or icon and add it to our guide so that we know who is responsible for what. So here I've just searched 2 person icons. I've just changed the color, and so we can always drag these icons and make them smaller at each point in the process. So booking a call, that is something the lead has to do. So there's lots of ways to manage it. I'm just going to keep it simple and exclude that part out for now. Different tools have different options. So there's Miro, Whimsical, they tend to work the same way as Canva. Something like Puzzle does have the option of assigning a specific owner or role. Another reason I quite like it, and you can also assign tools in that platform as well. But that is dedicated specifically to business process mapping. And for lots of us, this is just fine. So now you have a clear understanding of exactly how this works. I'm just going to go ahead and build out the rest of it. So here we have the entire process mapped out. And once again, it looks very different to this simple checklist that we started with. But we can follow this flow all the way through, see exactly where we're at and exactly what action step needs to happen or what decision needs to be made. We're also very easily able to distinguish between dependencies. And although I haven't added ownership here, as you can imagine, once you add these icons to each step, it makes it even easier. And now what we can do, now that we've mapped this whole process, is look at areas where things are breaking down. So we're going to come to Elements, search for a sticky note. There we go. You can always change the color of this here. You can also change the size of the font if you wish. And then what we're going to do is just make notes where we're experiencing friction. And I'm just going to share one example with you now. So let's say I'm attracting new leads, quite a lot I'm marking as a good fit. We're getting on the sales call and then I'm finding they do not have the budget to work with me. That's a friction point. And what's happening is I'm spending a lot of time on sales calls that aren't producing a positive outcome. So here we can go in and we can make notes like better qualification process to account for budget. So maybe knowing that's the friction point, what I need to do is revisit my sales page and make sure that I'm communicating my offer and my pricing clearly. It could be to introduce a question or a drop down on my project inquiry form that addresses budget, and then when a lead comes in, I can know based on what they've selected whether they're a good fit or not. So there's ways that we can address it by identifying the root issue. Now, if I was just to look at the symptoms, I might say, oh, none of my sales calls are converting. I've not got enough time in the day. I'm spending all my day on sales calls. And that's a symptom, but it's not the root issue. The root issue is a lead qualification. And so by mapping this out, I can understand that. I can go to the source and then I can look for ways that I can improve it. And that's just one example. Beyond visually being able to understand exactly what is happening in a workflow from start to finish, there are many many benefits to business process mapping. Firstly, gives us back our mental bandwidth. I'm not having to try and piece together that map in my head. I can see it on the page. I don't have to think about it. And on days where I might have a lot going on or I'm just not feeling my best, I'm going to refer to this and it's going to save me a whole lot of time and energy. Not only that, by mapping this out, I can start to ask myself, is there areas where I can make this easier or where I could create templates in the process? For example, maybe in those follow-up emails, I create canned responses that I customize for each lead, but the main email is already pre-written. Maybe I have a set of proposal templates based on each offer. And maybe I have dedicated resources for when a lead is not a good fit, but I still want to provide some value. All of these are going to improve this workflow, not only for ourselves, but for our leads and potential clients. Now, tied to the templates, that's working straight on improvements. Before we get there, this is also going to help us spot inefficiencies where things are breaking down. So often we think our business works a certain way, and it's only when we map it out we see actually there's a disconnect between what I think is happening and what is actually happening in my business. By mapping out that process, we're able to see, okay, this is where things are breaking down, and we can see the cause and effect. And by understanding the root cause, we can work to resolve it. We're also able to see who is responsible for what at each stage. And this is particularly helpful if you do have an internal team because it assigns ownership and accountability. But it also applies in things like the sales process. If we don't assign responsibilities, are we ever following up on a lead? Are we just letting them fall through the cracks? If a lead is responsible for taking an action such as approving a proposal, signing a contract, paying an invoice, are we communicating that clearly to them? It's also going to help you understand where you're investing money in tools and if that is the best combination for you. You might find that one tool that you thought you were using and you were investing in is completely redundant in this process and no longer needed. Great, you've now made a saving. You might realize that actually the tools we're using isn't the best combination, or when you add up the cost of all of them, there might be a better alternative that you once thought was pricey, but you're seeing it can do a lot of this for us, and so it's probably a good investment. If you are trying to build a team, having this process laid out is going to make it a lot easier to onboard new team members and have them execute a consistent quality output. If you are looking to automate, having this process built out lets us see which steps can be automated, where we need manual effort, where it can be a full-on automation, or maybe a hybrid with human in the loop. If you are a solo service provider, it means that you are allowed to take a break. Even if you don't want to build a team, if you are ever in a position where you need some help, or how often has somebody asked you, can I help you with that? And you've had to say, that is really kind of you, but you can't do what I do. Now they can, because you have it all mapped out and the process is in place. Now, before I share my very favorite benefit to all of this, a few considerations or words of caution. It's very easy to get excited about this when you first see the benefits and think, oh, this is why I'm stuck. I'm going to go map my entire business this week. We want to focus on one process at a time. Otherwise, it is going to be overwhelming and you may end up paralyzing yourself out of taking action. Our goal is to reduce the mental load, not increase it. So we want to focus on one process at a time, the one that we are executing most or has the biggest impact on our business. So think revenue generating or retention activities. Of course, it does depend on where you are in your business and where the biggest friction is. For me, it's content creation. So I've got my sales process down, my content creation workflow, not so much. So that's the one I need to be focused on next. And that brings me to my second point. Focusing on what is real, not what is desired. So once we have mapped to reality, we can then start to improve the process. But if we start to do it as we go, as we start to map it and we think, oh, What if we did it like this or that, and we never actually map to the current reality? Then we never understand the real friction points, the difference between a symptom and a cause. We don't understand the real costs involved or even the workload involved. So we want to map to what is, even if it's uncomfortable. And then from there, we are empowered to make better decisions. And that brings me to my favorite benefit, especially if you are a solo service provider. Doing this work forces us to step out of the operator role and think like an owner or a founder. So often we can think all of these processes live in our heads and we're doing them every day. We know them inside out. And often that's the problem. We're so close to them that we don't know the friction that we're experiencing or where things are breaking down. We're so used to just fixing it that we don't realize that there is a better way, or this is costing us time, energy, money. When you are able to step back, we've all heard the phrase work on your business, not in your business. When you're able to see this at a bird's eye view, you start to look at your business differently and you start to make decisions differently based on long-term strategic and sustainable growth. A process map isn't one and done, it's a living document. Processes are meant to change as the business changes. And what's great about this is that it gives us the structure and the freedom that comes from having structure, while also being flexible enough to adapt and change to our environment. Now, I'm not saying business process mapping is going to fix every issue in our business, but what it is going to do is provide us clarity, understanding, and the data we need to make more effective decisions, so that if something isn't working in our favor, we can flip the switch and adjust the right levers in order to create a better outcome. Whether that is changing ownership, adding additional steps in, providing templates, changing tools. We have the information we need to make that decision. I hope this has provided you with some clarity and value. If it has, and you think I've earned a like or subscribe, I would appreciate it so much. Above all else, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, have a beautiful day wherever you are in the world.